Thank you to all of our speakers and welcome back everyone to the main room. We will now deep dive with two of our invited speakers in a fireside chat. Please allow me to introduce the moderator of the session, GautumGorki, Executive Director and Head of Business Solutions for the Analytics Center of Excellence at DBS Bank. Thank you all, and over to you, Gautam.
Thank you. Hello and welcome everyone. I am Gautam and I will be the moderator for today's exciting fireside chat. It is my pleasure to welcome Kelly Forbes and Professor Keith Carter in the panel today. A quick introduction about both of them, although they have been presenting before, but just to quickly introduce themselves. Kelly Forbes is the Executive Director with the AI Asia Pacific Institute. She is a dual qualified lawyer, common as well as civil law. Kelly sits on the founding review board, AI and Ethics Journal at Springer Nature. She is also an angel investor in technology companies. Knowing Kelly, she is passionate about building bridges between different stakeholders, like regulators, industry practitioners, academia, to navigate the social, ethical, and legal challenges being imposed by AI. So welcome, Kelly. Professor Keith Carter is an associate professor at the National University of Singapore, School of Computing, Department of Information System and Analytics. He is the director of NUS Ripple FinTech Lab and co-director of the Crystal Center, a deep fintech think tank focused on crypto, security, technology, and algorithms. He's the author of Amazon's bestseller, Actionable Intelligence, a guide to delivering business results with big data fast. So welcome, Professor Keith Carter, in this panel. Now, just to set the context for this fireside, we have seen enormous potential of artificial intelligence and machine learning in banking and financial services industry. And I come from the industry, so I'm the practitioner of AI and machine learning. And the application of it is almost everywhere. So right from offering personalized product and services at scale to customers, to detecting frauds, improving business processes, human capital management, and so on. But at the same time, we are also seeing a lack of trust in these AI solutions, with challenges like biased and discriminating results that may even amount to human rights infringement. So in this fireside, we would like to discuss and get views from our panelists on how should we ensure that we build trust in AI so as to not lose the massive innovation potential that AI offers today. What are the key tenets of responsible or trustworthy AI? What are some of the emerging trends in AI impacting future of work? What are some career paths, for the people interested in building a career in data science? So, let's touch upon these, topics for the benefit of the audience panelists. So let me start with the legislation and the role of governments around responsible AI. So first question, do you think, government should be involved in monitoring how customer data and machine learning models, are used in financial sector? And to what extent their involvement should be, so that we ensure that these regulations do not stifle innovation and benefits of AI. So Professor Carter, over to you.
The short answer is yes. Government typically represent the will or the best interests of the people. I say that broadly, of course. And so beyond that is two things are necessary for an AI model to be successful. One is the type of data that's fed into it, the quality of the data. And the second is the model itself, the robustness of it. So with that, I'm going to just leave it there for a moment and let Kelly take over further, because we'll just start off with a key point.
Thanks, Keith. I think that was a good foundation there. I absolutely think that the government needs to be involved in setting the foundation for, it's this governance around AI that, will never be black and white, like I was discussing in my presentation before. But I think that to be able to start with something, I think that foundation needs to come from the government. And we are already seeing developments towards that, right? There's already been conversation on regulatory level overseas and also in the region, in terms of setting what this foundation principles are. But I think that we will probably start to see more. And to your question, that in terms of what this could look like, so that we don't stop innovation, I've actually believed that building trust and setting the foundation will do the opposite for the industry, right? Right now, the industry is very, and given a lot of recent use cases around AI, not only in the financial industry, but in every single industry. So building that trust and letting clients, customers, and the industry in general know that they can trust that tool, I think that would do wonders actually for innovation and for the technology. That's my personal view.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's the that's what we all the regulators, especially in Singapore, are working towards to build that trust back of the customers. Now building on that, what you said, Kelly, and from your experience, how are different policymakers across the countries are managing the trade-off between the convenience what customers get and their safety? So it's all about trade-off, when you talk about machine learning governance and all that. So what's your take on different policymakers across the globe?
Yeah, I believe it will always be a trade-off. And if we look up to what Europe is doing, and the developments they came forward with last year, which is something very, very innovative in industry. It's the first region to have those regulatory developments for the technology. What they have done is they have classified how the technologies apply, right? So they have, we can't classify the same facial recognition system to having Netflix that will help you to choose your Friday night movie, right? So we need to approach this differently. We need flexibility, right? So we need some boundaries, yes, but we also need flexibility. So we need that room. We need to leave that room so that industry can work with. And in that case, I think Europe has really done a good job. They have classified certain technologies and the application of those as, we need to have caution here when dealing with this. This impacts directly people's life, healthcare, for example, right? So having diagnosis, facial recognition, and, we know there's a lot of more serious applications there. And, and then they have classified other technologies on a soft ground, which, leaves more room for industry to work with. So I think that's the balance that we need to start seeing more.
At the risk of being controversial, I like what Kelly has said, and it's the key. Certainly Europe has jumped ahead, and they had to, because they don't capture the Netflix data. Unfortunately, European innovation has lagged behind China and the US. And so when someone comes to watch a movie, they're not watching it on any notable European-based server. And as a result, if Netflix said, hey, I want to see if he's smiling or sad, and then I'm going to predict the next movie, all that data is going to a US system. So all the European citizens' data is going to a US company. And Europe is rightfully concerned about that. On the China side too, same type of situation. Hey, we want to use AI. We want to delight the customer. By the way, use our version of Netflix, right? And then all these predictive capability can be there. And China, like Europe, as Kelly has highlighted, has a very strong data policy. Certain things can't leave the country and so forth. But within country, you can do a lot of things, right? So I think there's a commercial aspect to it, and also a protectionist aspect potentially for the different, as European Union demonstrates, as well as a social contract, which is different countries' citizens feel different ways about privacy.
If I could just jump in there, Keith, that was a really good point, I think, and I think it highlights perhaps one of the biggest challenges we have when having this conversation, which is, we're really dealing with two superpowers, right? And you highlighted one of them, China, and the US on the other hand. And we know most of the developments are coming from them. So, we really need to, and China actually, have been doing a lot of work around this in the last year or so to think about how they can phrase that. But one of the concerns when Europe came forward with these developments on the regulatory level was that they're going to be even more, behind the curve because they now closed many doors which remain open in these superpowers, right? So it's not an easy solution.
Kelly, spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Professor Carter, you mentioned about the social contract, and I know that you have been a great proponent of social contract, helping helping shape societies for a common purpose. Do you think having a social contract in this context between different stakeholders to establish maybe an international standard, policy, or practice to help maximize the good and minimize the bad part of AI, would that help?
We have social contracts in place, like Google. When you Google something, you assume that they won't just blast it onto the newspaper the next day. Whatever you type in WhatsApp, that you assume that it won't be used against you. But many politicians find out the other way around when they run for office. And so, what is this social contract to me? It basically is that many of us don't read the terms and conditions of the services that we use. Now, can there be an international standard? It's difficult to say, right? Like in the US, the Patriot Act said, we're for your protection, all Americans, we will look at all your data. And in other countries, they have maybe a different view. We're looking at all your data, and the citizens are like, I'm very nervous that you're looking at all my data, and it might be used against me, as we've seen in various countries too. So an international standard could help, perhaps, as long as there follows along with it, how does a country treat its citizens? I think you have to get to the basics, right? Like a trust level has to be there. As Kelly mentioned, trust, and you highlighted trust, as some of the earlier speakers talked about. Trust is so key. And then the governments that say, here's an international standard, can't break that trust.
And very challenging, right? Because I think, as Keith said, that social contract is very different. The social contract we see in China is very different from the Western world, for example.
That's right.
So in terms of having, something that universally would agree with, we're still trying to agree on many other things, that came before AI. So that's, I think, the first challenge there. But, we, in many ways, we already have the social contract, in every single country, right? For example, when we have, the government exchange for, we know where you are, right? We can access much of your data in order to protect you. So we provide security in exchange for that. And people might not be necessarily aware of it, but we have been agreeing to this for a very long time. There's nothing new about this. Now that we
I think we are losing Kelly in between.
A little, yeah.
Yeah. So continuing with you, Professor Carter. So I think it's all about the customers and taking that human-centric approach in designing AI solutions and AI governance frameworks. So how important is that to give autonomy to the people for them to determine what happens with their data?
So autonomy to the individual, and Kelly's back. Kelly, welcome. In terms of the individual challenge, I think that education is something we all talk about, right? And let's educate people. But do they care? You can send out messages, and I believe that each region has been educating people. I remember Germany had a newspaper article. Be careful of this Bluetooth teddy bear. It might be listening to your conversations. You know, in the meantime, the U.S. is, here's a Bluetooth teddy bear. It will track your kid so that you can make sure they go to school and come back safely. I mean, there's different situations and scenarios as to why we even want to give up data to provide. And so as an individual, for sure, if we could control it, I think the biggest thing about individuals saying, hey, I'd like to control my data is, what are you willing to give up? You can perfectly control your data today. Take your smartphone, turn it off, make sure all your family smartphones are turned off, and then at nighttime, you can probably rest easy that no one's listening to your conversation. But then you miss out on this text and this email and all the convenience, like Kelly mentioned, the trade-off between these two things. So we can already make the choice, but to what extent do you cut things off? Now, should you make the company, treat each individual in the myriad and matrix of ways that they would protect their data? I'm not sure, but I feel like Google does something not too bad. They at least show your ad personalizations. As we use Google Maps, they show where you've been in Google Maps. I feel like that's helpful because then at least you get to see the data that the company has. Then you can use it yourself. Hey, I've never gone to that place. or hey, Google, I disagree with this ad personalization. Let's turn that one off. And I feel that type of thing is not too bad.
Fair point. So Kelly, your take on this, taking that human-centric approach in designing, the AI solutions, how important that is from a governance point of view?
Very important, right? So I think that's, I think we started this conversation thinking about, is it the government role to start, setting that foundation? And I think we could all agree that yes, it's the government role to start those conversations, but then industry, will be the ones leading and bringing that into practice, right? And what we're seeing now is, like if we use Singapore, for example, it's being one of the first governments to come forward with principles, framework, and to define, analyze that, hey, we need to shape this, because we're seeing we're already having some problems. So, and that process started about 2 years ago with principles, frameworks, right? So industry needed that time to catch up with, now we have this framework. So when we're developing and implementing this technology, we should consider, are we having transparency here, right? The system is, for example, making decisions, and in the financial services, we are seeing a lot of that, right? Making decisions about people's credit, for example, right? So if someone applied for a loan and they got rejected, how can they find out how the AI system made that decision, right? How did they arrive there? And I think that links to a lot of what we will need to do in practice, in the upcoming, more and more. And we need that explanation. People need to understand that first of all, there is an AI system making the decision, and then how it arrived at the decision so they can question it. So these are, principles guiding it, but we are still, a long way from, here's the framework and here's the practice, right? So we have this gap still, and to solve that gap, I think that's where we are right now, and do we have regulation to be able to really push industry to be at that standard, right? So these are questions that right now we're all trying to tackle.
Yeah, and I think there is always a maturity, curve which we need to kind of, define and follow, especially when it comes to AI governance. So let me change, gears a bit here, and let's talk about some emerging trends and then, what some of the opportunities in the AI space. So Professor Carter, you earlier talked about, on Metaverse and then the actionable insights needed for Metaverse and all that. Now, what should businesses be thinking about, doing in terms of Metaverse? What's the significant shift, people should anticipate, especially in financial industry?
Well, first of all, that your life can be right in the metaverse. You never have to leave your desk or chair. Oh yeah, that's the way we are right now. We're here on this thing.
Good point.
But further is, from a financial perspective, all that I maybe would want to do, go to school, go to the office and so forth, would be in the metaverse. And so then I'd be able to do all my business transactions, all my banking transactions there. So we've got to get back to the basics again, redo authentication, redo lending, redo depositing, like the whole thing, redo payments again, all in this new medium. So that's what banks should be thinking about. Do I open up a new branch in the metaverse? What does that look like? Or do I go to decentralized finance? Why do I need to have a branch anymore, which was a older technology altogether, an older way of doing business? When I can have a trust list, I just go and I want to deposit something. Why should I give a username, password, all these old things? If I'm fully authenticated in the metaverse, which you would think would have a deeper sense of authentication, terrible things like you're wearing a heartbeat, so your heartbeat is validating you. What did they have? The new goggles that can also see your thoughts. So you can imagine if I tried to wear Kelly's, my thought pattern, my temperature, my everything would be different. And so the authentication will be much higher than username, password, even, face. It'll be at biometric levels that, no one will be able to fake their way in. And so authentication will be quite different too.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the emerging fields. So something like machine learning ops. Now the aim is to increase reliability and trustworthiness of models in production, but that may not necessarily be a focus of universities yet right now. So develop machine learning ops kind of skill set and educate our young generation. Is there a role difference between academia and industry? Professor Carter, coming from NUS, do you think there is a gap which we need to bridge?
Well, I disagree with the question. I think the university is looking at things like how do we get machine learning models or better credit scoring models, like China's Ant Financials, Ant Group's social scoring model, to be useful and safe and so forth. We've been looking at that for years. If anything, I would warn commercial organizations, they've run too fast to XGBoost and whatever type of thing is on the shelf without realizing that the data set they have is gone, is bad. Because they go to the bank and they say, I have this really advanced model. And the bank says, great, here's all my lending data. And then you say, well, do you have data on the people you didn't lend to? No, they never fill out a form. So your model's only half full. Already, the data's bad. So that's the key thing that companies have been missing. What is it called? The Go game, AlphaGo, didn't win by only seeing its side of the board and knowing its pieces. It perfectly saw the competitor side. It saw every move that it didn't take and had all that data. Banks don't have the person who we declined the loan for. Did they pay the loan? They don't have that information, and the credit score only aggregates it. So this is a huge gap, right, in terms of the model and the data itself. The second thing is social's credit scoring is nice because it's not that the lending occurs at T+1. In other words, I started, then I lent, and now I'm done. It continues to look at the person's social situation, because most people don't want to not pay, but when a sick aunt or someone is hurt or something, or someone has a gambling debt and they're pressured not to pay, that's when you have another type of non-performing loan. But that data isn't in our traditional lending model. We finish, okay, now let's see if they pay. So there's a question: should the data continue to come in for us to be lending the right way? That's where the metaverse again is going to provide your whole network, whole life. So now we know whether we should be calling that loan in now, or should we be allowing you to perhaps even borrow some more?
Okay. So Kelly, I think we're running out of time, but last question, and we have got many students in the audience this evening. So in terms of career and building, career in data science, do you have any advice or guidance on how to get started in AI, and what are the areas to watch out for?
Yeah, thank you. So I think first of all, we will have to understand AI and other emerging technologies. Every career path will have to, meet that criteria. I think, when we need that more and more, right? So, you can no longer have, even a lawyer that does not understand technology, right? Every single job will be impacted by it. We will be using it more and more. So I think, I know we're running out of time. So just to keep it short, I think that, being able to have that baseline of understanding what the technology is and how it works will be, the first step. And then, of course, we will all have to start understanding better and how to manage the implications of the technology, right? Because that's a big step as well in terms of monitoring, right? That every single job position needs to understand that.
Yeah. Professor Carter, your views on for some advice on to the students in the audience?
We have about 3 million career working people in Singapore. The World Economic Forum said that 50% need to be upskilled for this new economy. That's a lot of people that need to learn this stuff. And there's good news, though. There's 30,000 plus jobs open in technology in Singapore right now on LinkedIn. So when you graduate, come on out. Join us, Kelly and Gautam. We're here. We're waiting for you.
Oh yeah. We are welcome with our open arms. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And look, let's not forget that, Singapore is such a great place for young people to be right now because, it's being one of the first governments to put forward a lot of the work around workforce, the future of work, right? There's available resources online for everyone to, retrain, upskill, right? So it's a great opportunity, I think.
Okay, I think that concludes our fireside chat. Thank you so much, Kelly and Professor Carter. I had a lot of takeaways for me to mull over. I'm sure for the audience they have learned something. There are takeaways from this fireside. Thank you audience for attending this, and thank you Kelly and Professor Carter again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.